Even after losing a very frustrating game to the Texas Longhorns, there's really no reason to worry about Kentucky's resume yet.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, boy, howdy, do we got a show for you. Going to be breaking down Kentucky's resume relative to some past teams. Going to look at some history, kind of see where the Cats stack up, and then I've literally got a 7-page Google document to go through with you guys about every realistic scenario for the Cats from here on out, all the way through the SEC tournament, and what does it mean for the Cats in the postseason. A lot of variation to what could happen for Kentucky. And a lot of it, I think, depends on the health of Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Again, thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Want to get it out of the way right here at the very top. Yes, I just got a haircut. No, it's not that great. We move. It'll grow back. All right. I wanted it to start today's episode kind of talking about where Kentucky's resume currently lies, because despite an incredibly upsetting loss to the Texas Longhorns, which frankly we do not want to have to get into today, we move, all right? Bad losses happen towards, sometimes you have bad finishes to games. Kentucky has had several games like that this year. You were down 3 players. It's, it was a winnable game. It's frustrating. We don't have to dive into it. What I would rather focus on is what everybody is saying coming out of that game about the resume. As of today, according to the net, Kentucky is 17th in the net rankings, 8-7 in quad 1 opportunities. Do you guys realize that loss to Texas was a quad 1A loss? A 15-10 team, 16-10 now, Longhorns team was a quadrant 1A quality loss. So, all of the pundits coming out of this, Joe Lenardi, any other major site you want to go look at on Bracket Matrix, almost all of them are saying the same thing. Kentucky is still a 3 seed. They didn't even drop a seed line after losing to 15-10 Texas. Just goes to show you what I was saying over and over and over in that preview episode. Hey, this Texas team is nowhere near as bad as their record says they are. There seem to be a lot of Kentucky fans that disagree with that statement on Saturday night, but I think it's proving to be true, especially considering what a lot of people are saying coming out of that matchup. So if Kentucky were able to somehow hold onto that 3-seed line, it would be very, very big for the Cats, which we'll get to here later on in the show whenever we go through almost every single hypothetical scenario that you could possibly go through for the Cats here from here on out. Starting from this game against Vanderbilt this Wednesday, all the way through what could be the end of the SEC tournament, which could be 4 possible victories in Nashville. So, looking right now, 8-7 in quad 1, you're looking at a pretty strong resume with a lot of quality wins. What are the most similar resumes to Kentucky, and kind of where did they go in the past in the NCAA tournament? Well, Bart Torvik, a great analytics website, it has this phenomenal thing called Future. I think they've actually got a couple of different ones here. If you want to look at resume comparison, if you want to look at efficiency comparison, and then you can look at team cast, which you can project what this year's team is going to do. So if you want to go over there, you can actually look at this yourself right now. It's actually one of the teams changed before I could start recording, so I had to update a couple of different graphics, a couple of different graphs I wanted to show on today's episode. Sorry for people that are not watching on YouTube, but I'll try and describe this as best I can here on podcast. But here is kind of where everybody stacks up in terms of similar resume to Kentucky. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, you get to see the graph here, 2011 through 2024. This is what Torvik spat out after looking at Kentucky's resume. You'll note here immediately, no team on this graph went further than the Elite Eight, but only 2 of them lost in the round of 64. So let's go through here. In the round of 64, you'll see 2011 and 2000, or back-to-back teams from 2011, Louisville and Georgetown, that were 3 and 4 seeds. Upsets in that 2011 NCAA tournament. Also in 2011, 5-seed West Virginia, with a very similar resume to Kentucky, made the round of 32. You move to 2012, only one team here, very similar to Kentucky. Number 3 seed Georgetown again, round of 32 this time. You move all the way along down to 2016. You see Duke made it to the Sweet 16 as a 4 seed. Butler in 2017 made it to the Sweet 16 as a 4 seed. 3 seed Florida State got upset in the round of 32 in that year. And then all the way down in 2023, you didn't have any game or with any team similar with a similar resume to Kentucky from 2017 all the way to 2023, where you had 2. You had 3 seed Baylor in 23 that only made the round of 32. And then you had 3 seed Kansas State, who went all the way, if I'm not mistaken, to the Elite 8. For those of you that may say, which Kansas State team was that? Could it have perchance been the one that beat Kentucky in the round of 32? Yes, in fact, it was. So you've got one Elite 8 team here, and then in 2024, 2 teams made the round of 32, got upset, both Kansas and Baylor, as 4 and 3 seeds. So what does that tell you about Kentucky, just looking at the resumes here, period? Well, it tells you that Kentucky's in a weird spot where healthy, I think this team can do a lot more than what history says they're basically capable of with their current resume. Actually, I think it projects out. No. Oh, the ranks for this year are projected final ranks. Yeah, so this is what would be projected out for UK. I think this team healthy could do a lot more than the round of 32. But in their current state, with the current projections applied, you have to understand what we're kind of running into here. You're down important players. It's year 1 with a hodgepodge roster. I'm not saying you should not want Kentucky to go further in the NCAA tournament. Just understand they're probably going to win their first round matchup. After that, anything that they do, I think, is credit to Pope or credit to individual heroic performances that we could see in the postseason. I want to get to, now that we've looked at resumes, I want to get to efficiencies because it tells a more popular or a more positive story here. We'll do that in just a second. Before I do it, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback. You can stay in the action all the time. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature whenever I'm in the action, usually on an NBA game, an NFL game, just watching casually, but it keeps me invested in every moment of the game that I'm watching. Whether I'm backing my team that I like for a late game rally or I'm picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I've really missed my chance ever. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Every time that I look over at myself, I see this haircut, and I have thoughts. I have opinions. My PR team advising I don't do so. All right, so we've talked about the resume here for the Cats. We've talked about that. It's pretty good. All things considered, it's pretty good. Shapes up to show a lot of similar, we'll look at the chart again, a lot of like similar seeds that we're kind of getting excited about. 3s, 4s, just 1 5 seed. So you're kind of looking at Kentucky getting a high seed and hopefully not getting bounced. Because when you look at efficiencies, teams with similar efficiencies over the past 15 years or so, you'll start to see a more positive trend as of late. So we'll do that now. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this little graphic I put together. It's literally nothing fancy. It's very straightforward with the lines and logos and the seed lines. This is the compilation that Torvik spat out whenever I said, okay, give me teams with similar efficiencies to Kentucky and tell me what they did in the postseason. Way back in 2010, 8-seed Cal made the round of 32 here. And then in 2013, 10-seed Iowa State made the round of 32. 2014, 11-seed Iowa made the round of 64. And then Iowa State again in 2015 got upset as a 3-seed. You move to 2017, though. You start to see a more positive trend. 3-seed 2017, UCLA made the Sweet 16. Take us up to 2022. 5-seed Iowa got upset in a 5-12 loss in the first round. But over the last 2 tournaments, and I need to take a sip of water before I get into this. Over the last 2 tournaments, look at this. 3-seed Xavier, 2023, Sweet 16. 3-seed Gonzaga, 2023, Elite 8. Last season, 2024 Illinois, Elite 8. All 3 of those teams very similar in terms of efficiency to the Kentucky Wildcats. Fast-paced, high offense, average to slightly subpar defense. Illinois, more like Kentucky than anything, I think. So what does this all mean for Kentucky? If you want to look at their resumes versus their efficiencies. Well, I think the first thing that we need to know is, as of the last 2 tournaments, there are a lot of teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that have similar either efficiencies or resumes to Kentucky. Now, there's no crossover with a team that has both, but you'll see here, with the way that Kentucky's offense plays, they've got a high ceiling, I think. And again, if they're healthy, I think they've got a higher ceiling than any of the 3 teams here you see on my screen that either made the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. I think they've definitely got a higher ceiling than Baylor and Kansas from last year, because we've seen the way that Kentucky has acted against top-tier competition. Duke, A&M, State, Florida, what have you, Gonzaga themselves. I think, based on what we're seeing here, there's 18 teams with similar profiles. 6 of them over the last 2 tournaments. 7 if you want to include the one I updated, which I think actually was Illinois. 5 of those 6, or 7, excuse me, 5 of the 7 made the Sweet 16 or further. All of them won at least 1 game. Notice that? All of them won at least 1 game. Kentucky's going to get at least 1. Looks like it to me. You have to strengthen your resume, though. And the only way that Kentucky can really strengthen their resume right now is, well, if they were healthy. So that gets us to the question about Lamont Butler and Jax. And actually, an update about Kerr Kriisa. If you didn't see it today, Mark Pope had an interview late afternoon. I don't know if it was a radio show or a press conference. But he was asked about all 3 of those guys. And he pointed out, made the announcement that, hey, actually, Kerr Kriisa could be available for a medical red shirt. He's like, obviously, we'd like to have him back now, but he could come back next season. There's a really good chance he could. Now, the question of whether or not Kriisa fits well on next year's roster, I think, is a question for another episode. But we're going to see him in blue one way or another, whether it be in a few weeks or whether it be at the end of the year. I'm excited about that. I know the stats haven't been great for him this year, but I have a lot of faith, especially in a 6th-year guy if he wants to come back. But we're kind of like past the point of like, okay, is he really going to return this season? Now with Butler, right now, according to Pope, they're trying to get him to a point where he can essentially take a hit in a game. He's healthy enough to take a hit in the game and not be out or questionable for the next one. They want to get him healthy enough to where he can play multiple games in a row. They're not just trying to throw him out there as quickly as they can, which I think is very smart, especially understanding Kentucky's situation which we will dive into in great detail here in a second. We're already 15 minutes in. This is going to be a long show. But we're waiting on Butler. He said that he's probably going to get comfortable back in practice in about a week. Jax, according to Pope, has not shot with his right hand. He jokingly said he's been shooting with his left. We need Jax back. And he was saying that essentially, in the next few weeks, we're going to try and get him to a point where he could go. I expect both of them to be back before the SEC tournament. If you have to hold Jax out until the SEC tournament, so be it. I'd like to get Butler back for at least the Auburn game, but you're kind of at the mercy of what the doctors and what the trainers and what Pope and what Butler himself, how he feels, whether or not he wants to go, whether or not he should. I mean, this is a long-term thing for him if he wants to play pro ball overseas or what have you. But you can't really strengthen your resume right now, barring a miracle, because of your final 6 games. So that begs the question, well, if you can't get healthy now, when can you get healthy? Well, it's what I just said, which is in March. So let's look at the SEC tournament, because after further review, Kentucky has to show out in Nashville. Regardless of how they finish the year, they're going to really want to make a point in the SEC tournament. I believe. We'll get in another second. I need to take a sip of water. Hold up. Goodness. This is going to be a long one. All right. So, here's what we're going to do. After looking at Kentucky's final 6 games, which I'll read off here, at home against Vanderbilt, on the road at Alabama, on the road at Oklahoma, at home against Auburn, at home against LSU, on the road against Missouri. Kentucky's pretty clear-cut, according to multiple websites, that they're going to go 3-3 over that span. 3-3. So they would finish 20-11, 9-9, excuse me. That's the clear-cut, hey, this is pretty much what Kentucky's going to do, barring something dramatic here. You beat Vanderbilt and LSU almost definitively at home. Oklahoma, you're a 56% favorite. In reality, according to me, my opinion, Kentucky can't do worse than 2-4. And obviously, you can win any game. You could lose any game, but I don't think they're going to do worse than 2-4. I think their floor is 2-4. Their ceiling is 6-0, or basically 5-1. We'll come to learn that one game doesn't actually matter. But it doesn't matter if they're 2-4 or 4-2 or 6-0 or 5-1. You have to pick up multiple Q1 wins in Nashville because it can dramatically improve your already strong resume if you run deep. So let's go through every single scenario. If Kentucky finishes 3-3, 2-4, 3-3, 5-1, 6-0. Let's talk about everything that could happen in Nashville. And by the way, I am putting, unless I specify otherwise, I'm putting Kentucky as the 8 seed in the SEC tournament. And this is banking on if Kentucky finishes 3-3 right here. This is banking on Mississippi State finishing 3-3 as well, right? Which Kentucky would hold the tiebreaker if both of them were 9-9. If I'm a betting man, State plays Oklahoma on the road, and that's a pretty tight projection there. If I'm a betting man, I say they beat Oklahoma, putting them at 10-8, which they're not currently projected to do. But let's just say Kentucky gets that 8 seed, which is the most likely outcome according to all websites. 3-3 and SEC play, they get that 8 seed in the SEC tournament. If Kentucky goes 3-3 and they win against Vandy, Oklahoma, and LSU, and they lose to Alabama, Auburn, and Missouri, that's what the computers say is the most likely outcome by a pretty solid margin. We go to Torvik. when we take a look at the team cast, we put that in, and it says before you go to Nashville at 3-3, you'll be the number 15 overall team. You'll be a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament at 20-11, 9-9 in SEC play with 9 quad 1 wins. Your tournament matchup projected would be number 14 seed High Point. High Point is one of the teams on my board that I do not want to play. Why do I not want to play High Point? Well, they're number 93 in the nation, according to KenPom. They're 23-5. They really don't play defense at all. But what they do is they play offense. They have the nation's 28th best offense, and they do everything well. Top 20 in effective field goal percentage. In conference play, they're shooting 57.8% inside the arc. They're shooting 80% from the charity stripe. They rebound 36.1% of their misses, which is first in the Big South. They play methodical. They play slow. They don't turn the ball over. Now, they have a really bad defense, but they can hurt you on offense. If the ball's not going in for Kentucky, that's a hard out. I do not want to play High Point. Okay, so let's get to Nashville, right? If Kentucky goes 3-3 and they lose in Nashville, which would be to Mississippi State more than likely. Keep in mind, Kentucky is the 8 seed. Mississippi State would be the 9 in this scenario. As the 9, Mississippi State would play day 1, I believe Wednesday, against 16 seed, which is almost definitively going to be South Carolina. Almost definitively going to win that game. We're playing hypotheticals here. Just walk with me. Kentucky would play Mississippi State as projected, and let's say they lose that game to the Bulldogs. You'd still be number 15 overall as a 4 seed. At 20-12, 9-11 in Q1, and you'd still be projected to play High Point. That's a problem. So let's say Kentucky wins that game at 3-3 over Mississippi State. Their next game would be against the top-seeded team in the SEC tournament, which is almost definitely going to be Auburn, barring a dramatic collapse. So you beat State, and you lose to Auburn. Where's that put you after going 3-3 to close out the regular season? Well, you'd move up to number 13 overall, and you'd be the top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, according to Torvik. Not according to humans, just this one computer model. At 21-12 with 10 quad 1 wins. I think this holds up. I know it's one computer model. I think that checks out. Your matchup would be number 14 seed Yale. You know what happened with Yale last year. I know Danny Wolf is gone at Michigan. No, thank you. So let's say you get 2 wins in Nashville after going 3-3 in the regular season. So you'd beat Mississippi State, and then you would have no other option. You would play the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament, which is more than likely going to be Auburn. So let's say you win. At that point, you would not definitively, you would more than likely play Texas A&M as the 3rd team in the bracket because they would be the 4 seed coming out of it, right? So it's 1-4, blah, blah, blah. So you play the 9, you play the 1, then you play the 4, and you lose to A&M, but you have wins over Mississippi State and Auburn. What does Torvik say? Well, you're going to be the number 10 overall team, and you're going to be a 3 seed. So you jump 3 spots, jump into the 3 seed line at 22-12 with 11 quad 1 wins. Your NCAA tournament matchup would be number 13 seed Lipscomb. Or excuse me, number 14 seed Lipscomb. Wait, is that correct? Yes. I think 13 seed Yale, 13 seed High Point. I think I might have gotten that messed up. Because it's 5-12, 4-13. And then you'd have 3-14. Yeah, well, it's my bad. Just a typo, but the teams stay the same. Number 14 seed Lipscomb, which is a little bit better than Yale, but still a team that I don't want to play for reasons that we can get into after we see what Kentucky actually does here in reality. So you see here, 2 wins in Nashville get you, jumps you a pretty comfortably a seed line. You are from the bottom of the 4 seed line to the middle of the 3, which is really impressive. Let's say you win 3 games in Nashville after going 3-3 in the regular season. As projected, you would play likely, if no upsets happen, Mississippi State, Auburn, and Texas A&M. Right? After that, you would likely play Alabama, who would be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament title. Right now, Alabama, according to multiple websites, is projected to be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament, but the tiebreaker is essentially going to come down between them and Florida on March 5th in Tuscaloosa. And Bama, according to KenPom, is only a 51% favorite, so it's literally a coin flip. Florida, you shouldn't have lost to Missouri. You've put yourself in a bad position here. We're gonna say it's Bama for argument's sake. So 3-3, and now you got 3 wins in Nashville, beating State, Auburn, and A&M. And you lose to Bama in the SEC title game. Number 8 overall 2 seed at 23-12. It's what Torvik projects. You got 12 quad 1 wins. You may say, Lance, what? That doesn't make sense. How could a 23-12 team be a 2 seed? Well, it goes back to Kentucky's resume. Before they even get to March, if they are 3-3, Torvik says they have the 6th best resume in the country. That's going to carry Kentucky and it's going to prevent them from dropping to like a 7 seed, which we're going to find out later. It's going to prevent them from dropping far if they collapse. They have such a strong resume that if they add on to it by beating what would projected be State, Auburn, and A&M. Take Auburn and A&M out of it, right? It could be Bama who wins the regular season SEC title. It's between Bama and Auburn. But if you're the 4 seed could be like the 7 or 10 or whatever, right? Regardless, it's going to be a Q1 opponent, and the margins between A&M and like Ole Miss, there's not a ton of discrepancy there. There's still going to be a quad 1A win in Nashville. The NCAA Tournament Committee is going to look at it the same. So I know that we're nitpicking here about like what the specific matchups are. Just walk with me and understand good. Don't hear A&M. Hear good win. Hear really good win, right? And if you want to say, have there ever been any 2 seeds with double-digit losses? Yes, actually. North Carolina was, I think, 25-10 and was a 2 seed in the 2018 tournament. Let's not talk about what they did in that tournament. We'll keep pushing. The matchup you'd get if you won 3 wins in Nashville after going 3-3 in SEC play would be 15 seed Robert Morris, if you were a projected 2 seed, by the way. Let's say you win the whole shebang. Let's say you win the SEC tournament after going 3-3. You get wins over Mississippi State, Auburn, A&M, Bama. Who cares? You win it. If you tell Torvik they win it, you move up from the 8 overall team, so the bottom of the 2 seed line, to the number 7 overall team. So you're still a 2 seed at 24-11 with 13 quad 1 wins. You'd match up against 15 seed Central Connecticut. Notice that there. The worst case scenario, if you go 3-3, is a 4 seed playing High Point. Best case scenario, you're a 2 seed playing a team none of you have ever heard of. Again, the discrepancy. Why is there such a discrepancy between 1 loss and 4 wins? They'd all be quad 1 on Kentucky's resume here, all these wins. But even with no more, again, I want to reiterate, 6th best resume in college basketball. It's going to carry them a long way. And the more they strengthen it at a neutral site, the more the NCAA tournament is going to egg that on and respect it, especially if Kentucky's healthy. Like, if they're healthy by the time March hits and they're clicking and they're beating these teams, like actually beating them, I'm not saying throttling, but like actually they get victories over like State, Auburn, A&M, the like, yeah, they're going to climb. I think they absolutely should, especially if teams like Tennessee or Michigan State or St. John's, if they start to underperform here as the season goes down, there's even more of an argument to say, put Kentucky on the 2 seed line. Okay, so we see all the things that could happen if Kentucky goes 3-3. What about 4-2? What if Kentucky finishes the season 4-2, and then they are 21-10, right? Instead of 20-11. They're 21-10, 10-8. Well, again, Kentucky's a pretty hard 3-3 right now. Like, that's pretty set in stone according to computer models. But Torvik actually takes a look at, what the computer lines say. KenPom does the same, like what the percentage chance to win and the final score and like where Kentucky kind of sits. They say, Torvik says, Kentucky's best chance to win outside of games against Vandy, Oklahoma, and LSU, their most likely victory is against Auburn at home. Ken Palm disagrees. They think Kentucky has a 3% better chance of actually winning at Missouri than they do winning against Auburn at home. If we're playing numbers and we're looking back at history, Auburn hasn't won at Rupp in forever. If Robinson or Butler is back for that game, I think Kentucky has they have a better chance of beating Auburn than they do on the road at Missouri, just because of like how Kentucky's operated this season. It's the best team in the nation. They're going to get up for it. They're going to play with their heart on their sleeve. You go on the road at Missouri to close out after having already beaten Auburn. Maybe you secretly rest Butler or something like that before you get to the SEC tournament. You hear what I'm saying. I think it makes sense. Also, it's a quad one win regardless, so I don't think the NCAA Tournament Committee is not going to look at it too different. Not too different. Let's say Kentucky goes 4-2 with that win over Auburn, right? So it's Auburn, Oklahoma, LSU, and Vandy. They lose at Alabama and at Mizzou. Before Nashville, Kentucky is 21-10 with 10 quad one wins. They're the number 8 overall team as a 2 seed. That's a 7-spot jump if they beat Auburn alongside the 3 other teams, right? Your matchup would be 15 seed Robert Morris. Okay, let's say you go 4-2. You beat Auburn, but you lose your first game against Mississippi State. Here's the deal. Even if Kentucky finished 10-8, they'd still most likely be the 8th seed in the SEC tournament. Ole Miss is projected to finish 10-8 with a tiebreaker over Kentucky, and that's with Ken Palm projecting Ole Miss to go 2-4. We got a pretty close game projection against Tennessee and Oxford later this year. Or later this month, I should say, or later this season. So 3-3 with 11-7 for Ole Miss is on the table. You don't even have to talk about the tiebreaker. It would be Kentucky 10-8, Ole Miss 11-7, and then Mississippi State, if they finish 9-9 or 10-8, Kentucky still got them beat, right? So let's say though they lose to 9 seed Mississippi State. Well, what does it say? 4-2. So you're 21-11, 10-8 in SEC play. You're now 10-9. 10-10, in quad one games. You'd be the number 9 overall team. You'd be the top 3 seed. So you drop 1 spot, and you'd play 14 seed Grand Canyon. They gave some problems to Alabama last year, but stylistically, you see some similar stuff. That's a rough matchup for Kentucky. It would be scary, but I think it's doable. Let's say you go 4-2 to end the regular season. You get 1 win over Mississippi State. You lose to Auburn, who would still be the top overall seed in the SEC tournament. You're still number 8 overall. You're a 2 seed, 21-11, 11-10 in quad 1. You're going to play Robert Morris. Okay, let's say you go 4-2 and you get 2 wins in the SEC tournament. You beat Mississippi State and Auburn again, but you lose to Texas A&M. You may say, okay, we got 2 wins over Auburn. This is going to be crazy. No, number 7 overall, 2 seed, 12-10. And you start to realize Kentucky's ceiling as we get to the better case scenarios here. Let's say Kentucky wins 3 games in Nashville. Mississippi State, Auburn, A&M, doesn't matter. Q1 win. I put in a couple different teams here. You lose to Bama. Still number 7 overall, 2 seed. You'd play Central Connecticut. Despite having 1 more quad 1 game, you cannot overcome the 6 teams above you because of their better overall body of work, meaning they haven't lost to teams like Arkansas, teams like Georgia, teams like Ohio State, right? You're kind of capped here. So let's say you win the SEC tournament, right? Still, according to projections, still the number 7 overall team, still a 2 seed, 25-10, 14-9 in quad 1. You'd be matching up against the 15 seed Central Connecticut. This is the most similar to North Carolina, obviously, in 2018, because they were also 25-10. And I would be interested to see, were the net rankings a thing back then? I don't know. Okay, so what if Kentucky goes 5-1? Yeah, I sat for a very long time and looked at this. What if Kentucky goes 5-1? This is where it gets a little weird, because if Kentucky goes 11-7, which is what would happen if they went 5-1 over these final 6 regular season games, and they win against Auburn and Missouri, as we previously stated, Auburn and Missouri are the 2 most likely teams they would beat. They're like, there's almost no chance they beat Alabama. They're like favored to lose by like double digits, according to Torvik at least. I'm pretty sure at 11-7, they actually jumped to the 7 seed in the SEC tournament over Ole Miss. And that's if Ole Miss finishes 10-8, which is definitely on the table. But again, if I'm a betting man, I'd say Ole Miss beats Tennessee, which causes a lot of issues in the standings. But still, 5-1, 10-8 for Ole Miss, 11-7 for Kentucky, which would be Ole Miss that would be their most likely outcome outside of Kentucky's 11-7. So great, you move up to a 7 seed in the SEC tournament. Before Nashville, number 8 overall 2 seed at 22-9 with 11 quad 1 wins. You play Robert Morris. Awesome. Let's say you lose. You would lose to the 10 seed Vanderbilt. Nothing changes. 8 overall 2 seed Robert Morris. Let's say you beat Vanderbilt and you lose to Bama, which would be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament. Still, almost. Either them or Florida. Doesn't matter. Put them both in. You'd move up to number 7 overall instead of 8. You'd play Central Connecticut. If you beat 2 teams, you beat Vanderbilt and Bama, lose to Florida, or vice versa. If you beat Florida, lose to Bama, nothing changes. Despite being 24-10, 13-9, you're still 2 seed playing Central Connecticut. What if you beat 3 teams? What if it's Vandy, Bama, and Florida, you lose to Auburn in the SEC tournament title? Nothing changes. 15 seed Central Connecticut, overall, you're 2 seed, number 7 overall. If you win the SEC tournament, after going 5-1, close the regular season at 26-9, 11-7, 15-8 in quad 1 games, nothing changes. You are still the 7th best team in the NCAA tournament playing Central Connecticut, according to Torvik. Why? Again, it's the body of work of teams above you. If they continue to stay on course, you're not going to move up higher than that. You've had too many blemishes on your resume. Yes, the wins are phenomenal, and you may be clicking. You're not going to be higher than a 2 seed, and frankly, at 26-9, with how good the 1 seeds are, it's hard to make an argument for it, right? If you go 5-1 to close out the season, nothing really matters in the SEC tournament. But you got to go 5-1. That's the problem. You have to go 5-1. And if you're like, what happens if they go 6-0? If they go 6-0, if they win out the regular season, they will every single outcome be the number 7 overall team in the NCAA tournament playing Central Connecticut. No amount of winning in the SEC tournament changes that. So if you go 2-4 or 4-2, it doesn't matter. 3-3, 2-4, 4-2. You have to show out at Nash. You may say, Lance, we didn't get to 2-4. You're so right. Let's look at how bad it could be real quick. If Kentucky is 2-4, they finished the season 2-4 before the SEC tournament, which would mean they lost to Oklahoma, Bama, Auburn, and Missouri. They beat LSU and Vandy. More than likely, they beat 19-12, 8-10 in SEC play, 8-11 quad 1. They'd be the number 17 overall team, according to Torvik. They'd be the top 5 seed, and their matchup would be number 12, Drake. I'm going to pull this up. We are almost at 40 minutes on today's show. I don't care. This is important to me to tell you guys. Drake right now is 23-3. They have the slowest pace in the nation. A really good offense. They lead the Missouri Valley Conference in defense. They just lost to Bradley by 2, but they have 2 quad 1 wins, one over Vanderbilt by 11, and then one over Kansas State in overtime. It's a very good team with a very good head coach in Ben McCollum in his first year, by the way. Bad matchup. Okay. 19-12 as a 5 seed. I mean, I'll take it. You're not going to drop lower than a 6 here, as you'll realize. Let's say Kentucky loses their first game in the SEC tournament. Well, if they went 8-10, Kentucky would actually drop technically all the way down to the 10 seed in the SEC tournament because of the tiebreaker with Texas, right? If Texas goes 8-10 and everything else kind of falls into place. So you would play LSU in your first SEC tournament matchup. If you lose to them, it's a quad 2 loss. 19-13, 8-11 still in Q1 with a blemish on your resume. You drop from 17th overall to 20th overall, and you are the bottom 5 seed. Your matchup, McNeese State. We've already talked about McNeese State recently on the podcast. They're coached by Will Wade, formerly of LSU, one of the best teams in the nation at creating turnovers. Pretty good offense as well. They've played very close with State and Bama already this year. Very bad matchup. That is the worst case scenario in my mind for Kentucky to go 19-13, go 2-4 to end the season, and to lose to a team like LSU and Nashville. That is the worst possible outcome, to be at the bottom of the 5 seed line or the top of the 6 seed line. That is the worst outcome according to me and numbers. I do not want to look at 1-5 because I don't think it's realistic. Knock on wood. Holy cow. Let's say you go 2-4, you get 2 wins, you beat LSU, you beat Bama, who would be the 2 seed in this scenario, who you'd match up against, and you lost to Florida. You'd be 21-13, 9-12 in quad 1. You'd actually be the number 15 overall team. You'd be a 4 seed. You'd be playing High Point. We've seen this before, right? It's fine. Finish the season 2-4, but you have 3 wins in Nash. 10-12 in Q1. You jump up number 10 overall. You're a 3 seed again at 22-13. You'd be matching up against Lipscomb. We've seen this before. If you win the SEC tournament after finishing the regular season 2-4, you're 23-13, 11-11. Somehow Torvik says Kentucky would be a 2 seed. They'd be an automatic qualifier. That'd be 3 more losses than what UNC had in 2018. As a 2 seed, I don't see that happening. I still think you'd be a 3 just because of 13 freaking losses. But man, if you beat LSU and then you beat like Bama, Florida, or A&M, or then Auburn, like, you're going to have a really good resume, man. Those 11 quad 1 wins, I mean, you stack those up against just about anybody minus Auburn, and you look really good. Your tournament matchup, by the way, would be Central Connecticut again. So that's it. What have we learned? Kentucky floor, I think, is a high 6 seed. But that's not what Torvik projects. They project a 5 seed. That's the lowest they go. I'm saying floor for Kentucky is probably a high 6, but analytics say low 5. Ceiling is the 7th best team in the tournament. Where does Kentucky end up? A lot of it comes back to injury. A lot of it comes back to health and late game execution. Kentucky needed that win over Texas. First of all, to secure an 8 seed or higher in the SEC tournament, but to secure an opportunity to get, like, if you go 3-3 or if you had beaten Texas, then you go 3-3. I mean, you're like almost definitively a 3 seed, right? Almost regardless of what happens in the SEC tournament, unless you lose to a team like South Carolina. If they had like upset State and then made it and then upset Kentucky, which again, numbers say is unlikely. Kentucky's going to find themselves somewhere in the middle of this. Somewhere between a 5 and 2. There's so much volatility here because there's so many strong opportunities left on the resume. I am nervous because it all comes back to health. Can Butler get back and lead this offense? Can Jax return and score like he has in SEC play? Despite playing some tough defenses, he's knocked down some clutch shots, shooting very efficiently from 3, might I add. It all comes down to health. And if Kentucky can't get healthy, you call this year a wash. There's no other way to put it. You call it a wash. I think they will get healthy. We shall see. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at Lance_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Whoa. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.